Good afternoon and welcome to the Beyond the Blueprint webinar series. This series empowers health IT professionals with the latest insights, strategies, and design principles required to seamlessly integrate digital tools within their projects. Whether you're embarking on a hospital remodel, constructing a brand new facility, or undertaking a targeted renovation, technology and innovative design are playing an increasing crucial role in shaping the future of healthcare delivery. My name is Greg Malkery. I'm the Managing Director at Spyglass Consulting. I'm also the host for this series. Joining me today is also my co-host, Keith Washington, a renowned serial entrepreneur and respected board member at Companions in Courage. Keith, do you have any opening remarks for today?
Well, thanks, Greg. I'm looking forward to this episode. Just for our listeners, design is a really important topic for us. Beyond the Blueprint is about how design can help organizations manage complexity. We know how complicated health systems are. The industry is going through all kinds of change. So we love to hear from thought leaders excited about today.
Well, thank you, Keith. I'm also pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Michael Brown, an internist and former CIO at Harvard Health Services in Boston, Massachusetts. Michael, welcome to our webinar. Would you like to provide a brief intro for yourself?
Sure. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the opportunity. My background's a little unusual. After getting trained in internal medicine, I started working at Harvard University Health Services, and my career kind of evolved. I was interested in working towards improving the systems of healthcare, and that led me from an administrative role to eventually becoming the CIO of Harvard University Health Services, where I worked for 15 years. I also taught at the Harvard School of Public Health in a Master's for Healthcare Management program, and I taught the IT course for that. I taught a practicum course for students getting an MPH. And then after leaving Harvard, I ended up working for a consulting company that was doing things related to software as a service for healthcare systems. And while doing that, I went back and got certified as an executive coach. And that's become my newest passion, where I see the systems are broken, but leadership is so critical to improving systems that I want to work to help the people accomplish what they need to accomplish. As one of my mentors said, if you have a good culture, you have good outcomes; bad culture, bad outcomes. So I'm still interested in the IT systems, but right now I've gotten much more interested in the people systems within healthcare.
Great. Hey, thank you, Dr. Brown. Now, before we dive into our discussion today, I want to express my gratitude to our valued sponsors, Storage Systems and Simplify Medical. And today we're fortunate to have Lars Anderson from Storage Systems in the studio today. Lars, can you please share a brief welcome?
This is Lars Anderson with Storage Systems Unlimited. We're a distributor of a number of different storage items, including telehealth carts. Partner with our good friends over at Simplify. So looking forward to a nice education here on how things are developing and where we're headed.
Thank you, Lars. Now, during today's webinar, Michael will discuss the challenges that physicians face when stepping into leadership roles. He'll explore executive coaching techniques that tackle common leadership hurdles. He'll illustrate how coaching can be tailored to address individual strengths and growth opportunities, and discuss how to evaluate the impact and ROI for leadership development programs. So with that, why don't we get started? Michael, I think we can start up by asking, could you explain why executive coaching for physicians in leadership roles is important in today's current healthcare landscape?
Sure. So as I see it, actually, all physicians are leaders. The nature of their position is a leadership position within whatever domain. And as they rise higher within the health system, those leadership skills only become more important. It's not just the work they do, it's the work that gets done under their area of domain. And if you think about the incredible effort that everyone's making, good, hardworking, smart people trying to do the right things, we're really not getting the outcomes that we should be getting, considering all the efforts we're putting into it. And leadership is a way of aligning people so their efforts lead to more than the sum of the parts. And so the most expensive expense in healthcare is the people, all of the people. And so if you can get them to align and synergize and accomplish more, you've made a great investment. And a leader who can be just a little more productive in that regard is productive by getting other people more productive is well worth the investment.
Great. Thank you, Michael. As a seasoned physician and former CIO, what are some of the key obstacles that physicians often face when transitioning into a leadership position?
There are a number of them that I see. I see, first of all, accepting that your responsibility is not for what you do, for what gets done, and recognizing that there's only so much you can do in the day, and the reality is that's not what really matters. So I think some people, when they start the position, it's a little bit performative. They still want to look busy, feel busy, and they've had that career. And sometimes doing less is a little bit more. Learning how to delegate some of the responsibilities is not something that comes naturally to the physician leaders, especially because a number of them are perfectionists. When you're doing things that are under your control, you can have a lot more percentage-wise wins. But as you rise up, you have to push things onto other people, and things may not go as well at times. But a certain not success rate, or I don't call failure, but not success rate, is a way of is inevitable, and it's you just got to accept that as more people report to you and people report to the people who report to you, there will be things going off, and it's okay. It's part of the job. It's kind of that's the best you can do, and don't hold yourself up to the standard that is unrealistic. And when I talk to a number of the people, one of the things that often comes up is they think about all the qualifications needed to be a great leader. And they feel sometimes that they don't have all of those qualifications. And in some sense, I agree with them. They don't, but no one does. And get over it. The organization that hires you, or the board that hires you, has to hire a human being that actually already exists. And they can't hire someone that's imaginary, or somebody maybe who is really, really good at working in an organization who won't leave that organization because they're already stable for whatever reason. So helping people make realistic expectations of what they can accomplish, how they can accomplish, and then basically focusing them on what they believe is most important to the organization. So it's a little bit rambling, but it's a whole bunch of things that I see, and that's kind of that's the summation of it.
Great.
Well, yeah, and so I guess, Michael, that sounds like the summary of having a lot of direct experience talking to physicians about leadership. I guess in your coaching, give us some sense of, in that kind of context, they are afraid that they're not perfect or they're not up to the challenge or whatever the attitude is. When you're coaching them, how do you get them through that? What is your approach?
It depends on the specific of the situation, but it's often talking them through it in terms of what they would do. And sometimes it's basically letting them recognize that the alternative to them doing something is not that a super person does it better. The alternative is that you're not there, and you know that your patients and your organizations are going to suffer because there isn't someone as knowledgeable, as hardworking, as dedicated as you are. And so it's just giving them, I have to say, I sometimes have to give people a bit of a pep talk and say, I want to talk about what the consequences be. Realistically, if you weren't here and someone stepped into your shoes, what would happen? And I think at that point, people started recognizing that they are going above and beyond for certain things. They did put in the work to get into this position. They really did educate themselves in a really impressive way. And there's more they can do, and there's more they should do, and there's more they will do. But trying to keep people realistic, it's a general thing with coaching, try to get people realistic with the reality that is, not the reality that should be. And trying to just talk them through that aspect of where they're trying to accomplish, and just addressing the reality, good and bad, where I don't want to build them up so high that they're unrealistic, but I don't want to tear them down so much that they're being unrealistic. Just be in that middle zone. And I'm fortunate that I'm coaching people who I admire. I'm coaching people who really have done the homework, who really did do a lot to get where they are. And they really do have a lot to be proud of, and helping them appreciate how much they've done to make them uniquely positioned to accomplish what they want to accomplish. I also sometimes find it's helpful to talk to people about their vision for what want to accomplish. And different people have slightly different visions for what they want to accomplish. It tends to be the people I'm talking to are better positioned for implementing their vision. They're better positioned for implementing their values of what matters to them most, and trying to get them back to a discussion about their values and what really matters to them and how they can do it, and giving them helping them appreciate a sense of progress as they do make things happen. Again, not everything's going to be perfect. They will get sidetracked along the way, but it's not comparing the outcome to compare what it should be to what it would be if they weren't making those efforts.
So I guess in your experience too, do you have some of the, let's say, folks that you're coaching that are resistant to coaching or don't feel like they need coaching? I guess what's your mix? Do you have, it sounds like you said most of the people, they really appreciate the coaching, they're prepared, they're engaged. Do you see some of the opposite?
Not as much, although I'm hedging on that a bit because I think some of those people who are really resistant don't end up with me. It's a little bit of a self-selected group. But the other part is part of coaching is going into it with an open stance, a blank slate for what to expect and what you want from someone. And so the most important skill I think for coaching initially is to listen and really listen, so that you're not setting an agenda for someone. You're not diagnosing them in the first 10 seconds and saying, here's my simple solutions for you. You're basically going in there and being a talking partner to help them talk about what they care about most and how they're going about it. And that's something is generally appreciated as long as they have the trust. There are some situations where people are nervous about working with a coach because what's the coach going to say to others? And I understand that. And there's some things I do to deal with that. But most of the time when I'm talking to people, their most big important resistance is their time is extraordinarily valuable. And they don't want to do something that wastes their time. And they've done things. They haven't even tried coaching in the past and felt it was a waste of time. And so I have to transition it so that as much as I can, every meeting is a productive meeting. Every meeting is they're getting something out of it. And if I can help them think through some ideas where they have some options that they hadn't thought of before, or they approach things differently, they tend to really appreciate that rather quickly. I also I like coaching people who are striving. And if they're striving for something new or striving for something different, and they have a little bit of a struggle, and I can get that out of them, where they're what they really care about passionately and what their struggle is, and we can talk some things through, and they're not struggling as much, then basically I have someone who appreciates the coaching and wants it. I also bring to it a breadth of experiences where I can I can quickly help them sense that I understand their situation. They don't have to go into it in super detail, explain it to me. I can kind of relate rather quickly. I can also relate reasonably well to others with whom they work and give them this perspective of others and say, let me role play a few things for you to see. I can't say for sure how they feel, but how others might feel. And so I'm giving them information, resources, and a perspective that they wouldn't have otherwise. So I don't tend to find people really resistant to it. I also, the only thing I do have is over time, my coaching tends not to be over a long term. I like coaching people for maybe a year or something of that nature. And then I think it's healthy to basically say, okay, we've done this. I'm still here if you want me, but it's not necessary in that same way. I think there's a certain sense where I like when people graduate from coaching. And I do have someone who I've coached for 6 years, and she has some unique situations and unique challenges she's taken on. But for most people, I think it's better for them to graduate. I do also have others who've graduated and come back, and I think that's great as well, especially as they come to a new plateau. They're leaving a new plateau and taking on new challenges, and they've come back as well. But at some point, if they're not taking on new challenges, I think it's healthier to sometimes ease off of it. And I don't think that's resistant to coaching. It's just basically saying, what's the best use of your time?
Right. I love
Michael,
it. Thank you.
given
That's
some
great.
of the challenges you described, can you elaborate on your approach or methodology that you take to support physicians to become more effective leaders?
Yeah, again, I talked a second ago about the idea of starting with a blank slate and going in open and being a good listener and really hearing what they say and hearing what they want to accomplish. I also want to get a strong sense of what their values are in terms of how they approach things. My job is not to tell them what they should want. My job is to help them work through what they do want and things of that nature. I find that a lot of physicians, at least especially the early leaders, they're so used to following orders that they don't recognize when they are not stepping up to leadership the way they should. There was one line that I heard from someone when I was coaching, and it was something to the effect of, I'm doing everything they want and they still don't consider me a leader. And I kind of enjoyed that because it kind of summarized some of the challenges she's having. And I think to some extent, you're a leader when you have your ideas and you bring your ideas forth. And you basically, I sometimes have to help people recognize that in the room they're in and in the discussion they're having, they're the most knowledgeable person in the topic. And I often hear lines when I say, what would you want to do? They respond with, I think they want. And I think they want is not a leadership response. The leadership response is, from my point of view, I think the best thing to do is. Now, you don't have to be a bully about it and say, I have to get my way. You are a team player who say, I'm going to go along with whatever organization decides. But I think it's often helpful to encourage, especially new leaders, to be able to think through their ideas, even when they know they're not well liked, or the ideas are not well liked, so that they can come to stand footing to know what they believe, even if it's something different than the organization wants. And then there's also a little bit of help with diplomacy in terms of how to communicate what they want so it can be best heard and obviously, hopefully have the best influence, but also not turned off. I find sometimes people have a dichotomy of should I speak or not speak? And that's usually not the right question. The right question is, how and when do I bring forth my ideas so they're most appreciated and they're most effective? The analogy I bring up is when the cavalry is charging up the hill, the leader doesn't want to hear, do you think this is the right hill? Good question, bad timing. And so how do you basically figure out when people are receptive to hearing the idea and presenting it in a way where they're most receptive to hearing it?
It sounds like you're kind of like a therapist here. So there's the opportunity, but there's also the inherent strengths that each physician may have. How do you customize the two where there may be certain strengths and capabilities or areas of opportunity for growth? How do you bring that forward so they can really make the leadership role their own?
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit on the first thing you said, which is a therapist, and because there's a blur between coaching and therapy, and I try really hard. One of the things about going through medical training is I have a real strong respect for therapists, and I don't want to be a therapist. I think my training helps me appreciate some of the things that I should not be doing. And one of the things I like to think about in that regard is there are people who do dysfunctional behaviors, and they repeatedly do it, even though it's against their best interest. And the question is, why do they do that? And if you start digging into why they do that, that's really a therapy question. That's not something that I get into. I don't talk about their childhood and how it makes them want something or makes them do things in that way. But what I'm doing is they have feelings or emotions or values and things of that nature. And as a coach, I accept those values. If I see something where it is concerning, I'll refer to someone else. But I'm working with people who are highly functional people who generally don't really need therapy. What they really need is that support to accomplish their goals. They need someone to talk through ideas and make them happen. Their strengths are often really rather well aligned with what they want to accomplish. And part of the challenge is with any organization, it's to have all the different components work towards what's in their best interest for the organization best interest. That's kind of the secret sauce of organizations. So with them, I'm trying to think about where do they contribute the most value? Where are Where are their interests for what they want? What's consistent most with their purpose? And so, how do I basically position them? Because when they are doing what matters to them most, they tend to be most effective for the organization. If they're working on something that really is not exciting for them, I mean, we all have work we have to do to some extent that's not exciting. But if they're not excited about what they're doing, or they don't see the purpose in what they're doing, they're probably not going to be that effective for their organization. So it's that puzzle of helping them think through what they can accomplish, and also their organization hired them for a certain reason. Their organization appreciates them for a certain reason. And how do you provide the organization with what they want, which is also what you want? And sometimes it's a nuance of sometimes have to reword things in somewhat different way, which makes it clearer to people that what you're providing is what the organization needs. Does that answer your question?
That certainly does. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and a follow up, I guess, to Michael on. So it sounds like your approach is often like listening. Let me just describe it as somewhat informal. You're having a conversation. You're developing a relationship. You're trying to understand. Do you have in the, like, say, moving your one of the people you're coaching towards graduation? Do you ever have some kind of more formal part of it, or is there a diploma? What happens?
I don't tend to have a formal diploma, and I tend to also like to do work in the context of what they're accomplishing. So I will not have a discussion, generally speaking, about let's discuss a certain aspect of their personality. That's not what I want to do. I want to describe what they want to accomplish, and through their what they're trying to accomplish, they discover about themselves, and they bring up the most important things and biggest challenges, which often leads to some of the greatest discoveries. So it does come across as informal, but there's a little bit of a method to that. It's a little bit of, one of the things people tell me sometimes is after going through a certain amount of coaching, when they're in a situation and they're not with me, they hear my voice. And I think that's true sometimes with coaching. You kind of, well, I'm going to be discussing this on Tuesday. What's that? And you start rehearsing that conversation. And in some ways, you're getting some of the benefits of the conversation before it happens. So I don't have that in that respect, don't have a graduation. I also feel I'm working with people who are really, really good at what they do. And unlike a curriculum where I have, here's what I want to teach, and here's what you need to know, as a coach, I'm actually looking for areas where I can help them. So if you think about a coach who's coaching Tiger Woods, they're not telling him how to do the swing. They're saying, I noticed this one thing over here when you do this. It doesn't work. You might want to try that. I might bring up something like that. And so the point where I'm looking for them to graduate, or they tend to want to graduate, is they've taken on a new position or a new challenge, and they start getting, I wouldn't say the job's easy, but it's a little more comfortable. They got the confidence that they can do it, and they know how to do it, and they're dealing with it well. And then at that point, they're not striving in the same way. There's still a lot of work to do, and at that point, it's time to move on. I also I use certain frameworks and things that I bring to coaching, but I bring different frameworks for different people for different purposes. And I don't really want to spend time with someone on something that's not an issue for them right now. I think one of the benefits of coaching is to get just-in-time teaching related to things that are most relevant to you at the moment. I think that's how you learn the best. And I also think when you're really good at what you do, it's hard to hear the basic lessons over and over again for the stuff you're doing well. It's too much time. So I think that focus is something that people really appreciate.
Yeah, I know I've had some experience with that too, being coached by executive leadership coaches, and it's a great process to go through for a leader, because sometimes just saying it out loud or being able to communicate it to somebody else really helps you frame and organize really what you're struggling with. It's kind of in the day-to-day grind where you're just dealing with the issues. It's difficult to see it. Stepping back with a coach, gaining perspective, getting somebody that you trust to listen, then also, Joe, encourage and continue to help with the process, like you said, of, working on the culture, developing more of a team orientation, getting more alignment among all the various stakeholders is, there's not like one person, no superhero that's going to do all that. So it's great. And I guess in your engagements, do you engage at an individual level or an organizational level or both?
Individual level. I've engaged by organizations, but when I'm talking to someone, I'm coaching that person. And so one of the things I have to do with the organization is come to an understanding about the confidentiality of it. And generally what I tend to say is, I will, and I tell the person I'm coaching this as well, the fact that we had sessions can't be secret because they're paying for the sessions. And so I have to do that. And the second thing is, if the organization has some goals for coaching, which I hope they do, I have to be able to say to the organization, I think we're making progress, or I'm optimistic about making progress towards these goals. So I can't take the coaching in a completely different direction. I can bring up completely different things unrelated to those goals in the session, but I got to basically tell the organization, your goals are still on the table. We're not ignoring them. We're making progress on them. And after that, I basically don't want to tell the organization anything. I want to basically keep it as private, keep it as trusted as possible, so that my client can feel as comfortable as possible speaking freely. The other thing about the coaching also is, you mentioned a number of the advantages. A couple others that I also tend to think about is, one is it's a safe environment where you can talk with someone who's not in the organization but knows enough about the context to have a deep conversation. It's something where it's someone you could step back a bit. And sometimes when you get into a crisis in particular, you're very focused on the focused problem you're dealing with right now. And sometimes it helps to have someone who can step you back and say, okay, how are you going to think about that a year from now? And let's put that in a broader perspective versus all that's going on in your life in the organization. I also find that at times work should be emotional. We should care about what we do. But sometimes our responses are a little too emotional. And one of the things I think is helpful is to have a coach who's helping you work towards what is in your best interest, not what is your emotional response. And I think intellectualizing some of these issues is sometimes helpful for people to then address it, so they can step back and say, okay, I have the right, I guess I do have the right to do what I just thought, but it's not in my best interest, so I'm not going to do that. So my rights say one thing, I'm going to basically not do that because it won't help me.
Right. What you can do and what you should do.
That's a common conversation I have with people. Yeah. I have the right to do this. I have the right.
Right.
You absolutely have the right. You have the right. Now tell me, is it your best interest? And having them, calming them down and talking through, and as I say, intellectualizing the discussion is for some people very helpful.
I wonder, Michael, if you could provide us a real example of one of the clients you've had and that led to some positive outcome as a result of your coaching.
Well, I can't give names.
Make a scenario up that might represent reality, just to give our audience an idea of how this process works and what the success was.
Okay. And the caveat on that is I pride myself on helping people with different things, and so whatever their problem was. So there was someone who, in fact, I had a few people, so there's a little bit of a composite I'll give. I've worked with a few clients who are really, really smart, and they know they're smart, and they've somehow informed that to the people around them in a way that comes across as disrespectful. And they're really good at what they do, but they don't understand why others can't move at the same pace. And kind of so in those type of examples, the people they're working with are who they're working with. That's at least at the level that this person's at, they're not going to change all the people in the organization. So how, in a practical sense, can they accomplish their goals? And alienating people in the organization is clearly not aligned with what they want to accomplish. And so helping them slow down a bit and find out that if they start the meeting by listening, what they later say is much more accepted, and they actually have a much better result than coming in and saying, here's what we need to do, and trying to just help them think through some of those types of things about how to say what they need to say, the way they need to say it, and when they basically need to keep quiet and let things take their course. When to let someone else speak up on an issue you know that they feel a certain way, and you don't have to just be the first one to disagree with everyone there every time. So there are a couple of people I've had in that regard that I've helped them be more diplomatic and help them be more effective in their organizations. And they end up doing extraordinarily well, because the reason they were tolerated is because they're so good. But the reason they weren't progressing is because they had that issue. So that's one I've dealt with a couple of times. I've also dealt with people, as I mentioned earlier, who have the issue of a little bit of an imposter syndrome and not being able to speak their minds about what they want to accomplish most. They're a little more performative. They were always amazing students. They always got A's on everything. They got judged to be perfect. And I help them think through what they think is the right thing to do and how they think it should be done, and learn to speak a little bit more forcefully as a leader, in the sense of, how do you communicate what you want to be done in a way where it's really clear? I sometimes have to point out to them and said, I think I know what you were getting at, but you didn't say it. And helping them go through the process of getting their ideas out there. And in the end, one of the things that I found interesting about for some of these people is when I help them speak through what they really believe, it ends up being more honest. It ends up being what they really believe, rather than this performative thing they're trying to do to please others around them. So those are two kind of opposite examples that I've run into a few times that I think are kind of interesting.
Great, that was awesome. Well, I have one last question, unless Keith has something you'd like to bring up. How do you measure the ROI or the impact of your coaching services on the individual and also on the organization?
Yeah, and that is a hard one. And I think one of the things is, it's easy to measure things like satisfaction and repeat business especially. But for the client, it's a harder thing to measure. One way I think about it is that you tend to be paying these people some really high salaries. And if you can make someone more effective who's making a high salary, then how much more effective can you make them, especially if they're doing it over the next number of years while you're working with them. I could also think of it as retention. Here's someone who you're investing in for this next level of organization. What does it cost to replace the average physician? And it's a lot of money. What does it cost to replace the average physician executive? It's a lot more money. So thinking about it and those things. But the biggest thing I like to think about is when you're working with someone whose work touches lots of other people, and you're making them more effective, they're making the organization more effective, how much can get done? Think about how much within, if it's an organization, the biggest labor cost is labor, but within their domain, the biggest cost is labor. What is the labor expense under those people? And if they can basically align people and make people more productive and keep them engaged and things of that nature, what's the cost of that? What would you pay for that? And if you look at it's hard to put a hard and fast number on it, but when you start thinking about those numbers, like in terms of what would it cost to bring in all those new people or just to make them more productive, it's so much larger than the cost of coaching. That's kind of the rationale that I give on it, that I basically compare the cost of coaching to these other expenses you're already paying and not getting full value on. You're not getting full value on your labor cost as you have right now. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to get you to get the full value on what you're already spending, and what I'm basically charging for that is minuscule in comparison.
So one follow-up question, Michael, I guess on your background with technology. So as you're going through your coaching sessions with your physicians and leaders, I guess give us a sense of how they feel about the technology stack that they have to work with and the tools, and if that's holding them back as leaders or something they see that's going to help them.
It's a mix. There are some who are technophiles and are touching the latest and greatest of all gadgets, and there's some that are feeling the frustrations. I mean, one of the things that I involved in early on was developing the electronic medical record to help people work better together and help improve the system of healthcare. And in some organizations, they have not had a good experience with electronic records, and so it's sometimes the technology is not only not working well, it also gives them a sense of out of control. You know, because when things don't go well, it's like this magic IT system that is beyond their abilities to fully understand, but now they got to deal with it again. So I see a range on that in terms of how people feel about the technology. There was a real sense a few years ago in particular, especially after meaningful use, where the feeling toward technology was far more negative because a lot of these systems were put in place for a very specific purpose, which is to get the money from meaningful use dollars. And they weren't really implemented in a way that really was ideal for the workflow. And since then, organizations have been making more of an effort to optimize them and make them better. So it's a little better in that regard, but there's a lot of organizations that haven't gotten very far in that regard still. So there's still a sense of frustration out there with the technology and what the system makes them do, and how it sometimes helps them in interacting with patients, and sometimes it gets in the way.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you for sharing your insights about empowering physicians through executive coaching. I think it's been a very informative session today. You discussed the challenges physicians face in stepping into leadership roles. You explored the executive coaching techniques that tackle common leadership hurdles. You illustrate how coaching can be tailored to address the individual's strengths and growth opportunities for the organization. And you discuss how to evaluate the impact and ROI for leadership development programs. For those of you today who are not familiar, I represent Spyglass Consulting, a product and go-to-market advisory firm focused on disruptive technologies and growth opportunities within the healthcare and life sciences industries. We proudly serve more than 250 leading entities, ranging from technology companies and management consulting organizations to healthcare providers and investment firms. We've published more than 30 market research reports on a diverse set of informatics-related topics. To gain access to our extensive library of paid research and to gain deeper insights into how technology is reshaping healthcare, I encourage you to visit my website at www.spyglass-consulting.com. Well, Mike, I'd like to thank you for sharing your time, insights, and perspectives. I also want to thank our sponsors, Storage Systems and Simplify Medical, who made this conversation possible. Michael, would you like to provide us with any closing thoughts for today?
So, I mean, I think the issue is, the thing I like to bring up is we all have opportunities for improvement. And if you think about sports, it's the best athletes that have the coaches. It's the best athletes who are always working to improve. It's the best athletes who see the opportunities. And it's not just sports. It's basically, it might be singing and acting coaches or whatever it might be. It's different than training where there's basically a defined thing saying, here's everything you need to know. But having the feedback and having someone you can work with to take you to the next level and help you refine yourself is what distinguishes yourself from maybe the top 98% to the top 99% or whatever it might be. And so I basically encourage people to take the time to think about where they want to improve, how they want to improve. And generally speaking, if you have if you're having difficult talking about something, it's really hard to improve in that. So focus on those areas that matter to you most. Go through a period of a little bit awkwardness of revealing it to someone else can often get you a long way to accomplishing a whole bunch more.
Well, that's awesome, Michael. Michael, for those in the audience who want to learn more about your services, how can they get hold of you?
Yeah, people get in touch with me. The easiest way is through my website at www.michaelbrowncoaching.com.
Great. Hey, well, thank you, Michael. And Keith, would you like to share any final thoughts in today's webinar?
Yeah, I really thought this was great, Michael. I really appreciate you taking the time and your insights and this opportunity to discuss such an important topic. It's really aligns well with Beyond the Blueprint, where we're talking about trying to help organizations make things better by design, think about the organization as a system that could be better utilized resources with integrating and co-creating people and processes and tools and technology. And this is such an important topic about investing in your leadership, developing leaders, investing in your people. So really appreciate everything you've taught us today.
My pleasure. Well, thank you for
back.
having me. It's been wonderful talking to both of you, and I have the honor of speaking in front of the audience. So thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you. At
you.
Beyond the Blueprint, we look forward to continuing the conversation, and we will definitely be inviting you back for a future episode. Take care, and I hope everybody has a pleasant day.
Thank you.